Michelle, it's so good to see you. Welcome to the Leaders Lab.
Thank you, Ken. It's so nice to see you again.
I know we've got some serious catching up to do. It's probably been 5 years, I don't know, since I saw you last. I know what was going on then, but for our audience, I always like to ask goofy questions, and I never know what the first one's actually going to be. But it's usually around your background, and you know, I know what you do now. I know what you've done. I think since we met and a little bit before then, but talk to me about like growing up and like what did you want to be when you grew up? What was your focus when you were a kid? Maybe walk us through your childhood a bit.
Okay, you got it. Which is kind of funny because it ties into how we met and the
Yeah,
context in which we met. Actually, my background in that way of what did I want to be, who did I want to be. I was raised in the Central Coast of California, so many people are familiar with like Bugs Bunny, like digging in sand in Pismo Beach. That was my hometown,
cool.
and so coastal California is really my identity. And I really only recently moved from California into the Austin area of Texas about 6 months ago, so it's still new. And I loved living in California and miss it dearly. But there were some things calling, and I have to listen when those calls come. But when I was 4, 5, 6, all the way till basically 40 years old, I had one dream and one dream only, and I wanted to be on television. And that was always around. I didn't know it then, but I learned later in one of Tony Robbins' rooms, which is where I believe I met you first, which is
Yep.
an event that he does once a year here in the US called Date with Destiny. And at the time, he was a really important teacher in my life. And so I finally got myself to that Date with Destiny. And it was at that event, just to bring it full circle, that I dropped to my knees because I was on TV at that point and I had been on national television and I'd made it to my dream entertainment news show called Extra. And I'd been on there I was on there for 4 years. And all I wanted was Tony to help me figure out a date with Destiny in some sort of indirect way. We never actually spoke at that point. To help me turn that into an award-winning, full-time, career. And at Date with Destiny, I literally dropped to my knees on day 4. It was like the values and rules day, which are
Yeah.
such important qualities for a leader to really know and then to embody. Um, and it was your dream of being on television. It was your little girl dream because it would be the only way in which you knew that you would matter, that you were worthy, and that you were valued in the world. And so you've done that, but now you've also, stepped onto the path of real self-discovery and real self-possession. And so it's time to really deepen into this and then also pay it forward and teach others how to step into their gifts and their power. And this was like, what? It was so foreign of no, 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 no. I was still attached, right, egoically of that little girl dream, but I couldn't deny that I had heard this very clear message. And so, literally, I think less than a few months later, my podcast was birthed into the world called Fire and Soul Podcast. My coaching business, my transformational mentorship that's helped now thousands and turned into a very beautiful impact for a lot of lives. It was born 3 months later. So there was something at that date with Destiny that helped me see how that dream as a little girl was important, but it actually brought me to the next step of my evolution.
What did you what were your key like takeaways from that event in terms of what did you learn about yourself? I mean, I know he starts normally with, why we do things the way we do, what our human needs are. I remember my own aha moments from my first event, but like, what were yours?
Such a good question. Gosh, that was 2017, December of 2017. The biggest takeaway that I got was the love that I felt in that room and how spiritual it really felt. And I didn't yet have a congruency of my embodiment of that, even though I
Mm-hmm.
thought I did. But
Mm-hmm.
it gets deeper and deeper the more that we show up in devotion. And I'm not dogmatic or doctrinal at all. I'm just talking about my own spiritual deepening. Um, but it was coming home and really taking off the armor around my heart with people in my life, including specifically and starting with my parents, my loved ones, my siblings, my friends, and wanting to share that love that was unbridled, that was unguarded, that was free and open, and unflinching with everyone that I could.
Right.
And live your passion is sort of a mantra of Tony Robbins, amongst many other. And I mean, I wore that like it was my identity, and it served that mission well. It got my coaching business going. But another story, maybe for another point later in this conversation, is then I realized even just all the egoic identity fueling that.
Hmm.
It's just been this delayering and dismantling of getting to the core essence. And I can't say I'm there right now. I'm sure in 3, 5 years, I'm going to recognize where I am now is like so far from where I really want to go. Not that I'm super hard on myself, the opposite. It's just this honoring of being human and what we think we learned in a moment that was so monumental. And then we look back, we're like, oh my gosh, that was just crumbs.
But it was monumental at the
At the
time, right?
time.
Like, and it's really monumental. And that's, I think, what you're saying there with the lack of judgment on it. It doesn't take away its importance in the moment. But if you're on a never-ending path of growth and discovery, you may look back on it as a marker in the road, like it was important, right? But it wasn't everything that I thought it was. Maybe back then, it was just it was a stone on a path, right, that I crossed. When you went through there, so your TV career, you had aspired to that since you were a little kid. It happened. When you were going through personal development and looking at your own like human needs and things like that, was there a need for reshuffling there? I know when I went in, you know, it was so funny because I'm like, this test must be wrong. Let me do it again. You know what I mean? And like, and everything for me was significance, certainty. And so I was chasing it. I was, there's nothing wrong with wanting to matter. We all want to matter, right? And I think when we talk about the human needs, I did a whole show on it one time. And the thing I try to make people understand is it's not good or bad. It's just with a particular order of needs or putting certain things above other things. Like, maybe I want to be successful at the expense maybe of my relationships, because if I'm valuing significance in first place and love and connection in fifth, then everything's going to give way to my significance, to my career, if that's where I'm getting it. Right. What was that for you? Do you remember that? Do you remember that exercise?
I do. I remember
Yeah.
it actually before Date with Destiny because I went to another event that he does, sort of his signature event called Unleash the Power Within,
Yeah.
also known as UPW is the acronym. And I had done that in March of 2017 before I got to Date with Destiny in December. But before we go there, just to offer a bit of context, so the six human needs, it's not even Tony's body of work. I don't
Right.
remember whose it is actually, but it's a beautiful body of work, and I think it's really useful for people, especially starting out in self-development. I know it was for me, but can we name them? Because I'm
Yeah.
trying to recall, like I think I've got five of them, but what are all six?
Yeah, so there's certainty, and I'll give a super brief description of each and feel free obviously to jump in. But certainty, so we all have the need to know that like the lights are going to go on in my house, and that when I show up for my job they'll give me a paycheck and things like that. And again, it's important, right? But then equally important is uncertainty. Like if things are the same way day after day after day, we're going to go crazy and get bored. There's a need for love and connection, of course. There's a need for growth. There's a need for contribution. And then, of course, the one we've been talking about a little bit is significance. And
Got it.
so, yeah, so the idea here is, again, not that like, well, I don't want to be significant. It's like you don't have to smash it down, right? It's just looking at the order of those, looking, I think, at our vehicles, like how are we getting that, right? I mean, a firefighter wants to be significant, probably, right? They want to be a hero. They want to save babies. That's a really nice way to be significant. But there's other people getting significance, maybe not with the best vehicles in the world, right?
Yeah, well said. For sure. When I went in and I took that first quiz, just like you, I was like, wait, this can't be right. Like significance was number one. Number two was growth. And I was
Ooh,
very proud of growth. I'd always been a seeker, kind of as
yeah.
we've spoken about here. And so For me, looking at significance is number one. I could actually begin to see how significance fueled so many of my successes, getting on television, all the bucket list items getting checked off, which was really important for me. See, look at me, I'm a mega manifester, all those types of things that were so fun and so important. And I look back and I'm so grateful that I have that. But after a few years being in those rooms and then going on to my own bit of a dark night of the soul and spiritual awakening, and I think a lot of people are experiencing that humanity is going through a collective shadow to light moment as we clearly feel it and can observe it with our own eyes and knowing, it became clear that, well, significance, it's still there. It's one of the top six human needs. It's important to be there, but I would say that at this point, it's the lowest. um, Love and connection and contribution have far outweighed even growth.
Mm,
Yeah, for me at this point in my life. And it was interesting because I didn't want growth to be off the top too, because it is such an identity. But then I realized what was sacrificed as a result of my growth and constantly, relentlessly, and that is the way that I would describe it, seeking growth
right.
and transformation. And then I became a guide in the transformational space. In fact, nowadays, and you'll see it on my website, that word doesn't really exist. Transformation happens. But the way I look at everything I do now is spiritual business mentorship, spiritual life mentorship, because I think everything is spiritual. But yeah, so growth was getting even in the way of love and connection and contribution.
Yeah.
They're very sneakster, these just the hierarchy of the needs. But I'm also a big fan of staying fluid, like being really present to where we are in the season of our own lives. And I don't just mean in a linear way of like getting older and that kind of thing, although that's important sometimes in life as well. But it's right now, where do I feel the most called to lean into these particular needs and to call them on and to really deepen into them? And so let me actually think about this right now. Where am I? Love and connection is absolutely number one. And yeah, it's actually still contribution. What
Yeah.
about you?
I mean, I'm gonna give you two answers. I'm gonna give you the way I'd like it to be, and then I'm gonna give you the way I think I probably act like every day. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, yes.
Growth and contribution are almost always tied for like my one and two. Chloe Madonis even had like an online assessment you could take that would rate them, right? Like that you could do. And I haven't seen it for years, but every time I've done it, those two, and then a very close with love and connection, and then significant still kind of rears its ugly head in there somewhere. I shouldn't
Mhm.
say ugly. If it's in fourth, it's fine, you know. And then certainty and uncertainty kind of play out the rest for me. Um, but yeah, I think I agree. Not just because you said it, but my growth can get in the way of my relationships at times, where it's even if you looked at your stack ranking something, but if something's number one by a wide margin, right? If it's a very strong one, and number two is a distant two, then again, what it could mean is that we neglect our relationships or whatever, which I think at times I have had the tendency to do. Where I'm like, I really do love to learn. I really do love to give back when I do learn stuff, and that's all well and good, but in balance, right? And so, but like you said, I'm also not too when the first two come up as significance and certainty. I think it's a fair bet to say that's probably not a great place to stay for a long period of time for anyone, right? Not judging anyone's needs, but that's probably not a great way to go through life. And I feel like a lot of people enter the personal development world with that realization, or those two being way up high. And so, but outside of that, it's we're all a work in progress. And like you
Yeah.
said, there's different seasons in life. And I think that if you're starting a new venture, I'm sure when you came out and started your podcast and started how could growth not be and contribution? Because you're trying to grow by providing a service to people that's going to deeply impact their lives and the life of others. How could those two not be super, super high, right? But again, you realize maybe I don't want to stay there forever, right? This is not conducive to fulfillment, maybe long term.
Interestingly enough, as you're talking and as women do, I'm thinking and contemplating my life and my reality in this moment. And I'm pretty certain that uncertainty is up there, is up there. It's like up there, like high, like maybe the highest that it's ever
Yeah.
been. And I say that because I am willing to go against the grain right now. I'm willing to speak truth to power, so to speak. I'm not afraid of saying what I used to be, but not afraid of saying what really wants to be said. And I mean that with clients in communities, on retreat, on my podcast, on social media. And so that comes with a lot of uncertainty, and also leaving California, 6 months ago, and everything I ever knew, really, and loved, and allowing myself to feel that uncertain call into Austin, because there was more of a what I knew would be a like-minded, like-hearted consciousness, real sort of spiritual anarchists, blazing trails of truth and freedom and liberty. And these are concepts that some of your audience members will really resonate with, and others not. But when I got clear on that, I had to be willing to let go of everything I knew as my business, everything I had built, this seven-figure, transformational coaching business. Um, and a lot of it principled in Tony Robbins' work, and then Jack Canfield, who was a really important mentor of mine as well, and collaborations with him, that served a lot of people over the years, and recognizing that I had to be willing to let all of that go in order to stand on my square of sovereignty.
Because that was also your truth in that moment and you just had to own it. And one thing I feel like in your evolution is that you've, whether you look back on it or not and go, oh, well, maybe I was misaligned here or there, it seems like you're always trying to be true to yourself and lean into that the last few years. Not that I know you that well, but just seeing your,
Yeah.
I guess, evolution over the last few years, you know?
I appreciate that reflection. And quite frankly, it feels like an honoring. So thank you for that,
No
because we know
problem.
each other well. And
Yeah.
but to know that you can pick that up from afar, because I really pretty much only serve women at this point. So you haven't
Mhm.
even had an opportunity to be in any sort of real context other than just from afar.
Right.
And that is true. Like I have conversations with my clients and my groups almost daily around there's just something about some of us that we get a call and we must answer it. We can't pretend that we didn't hear it. We can't pretend that we don't know it or didn't see it. It's there. And I know why a lot of people won't. And it's because there's so much fear, and that is the uncertainty, right? So I've just become more willing to engage with the frequency of uncertainty as a masterful teacher in my life.
Sure.
And also, yes, I need the excitement and the variety and all of that, but really it's I I just want to keep my heart open and not flinch at whatever might be on my path, whatever's coming, on the external, that is always reflected from the internal. And so a lot of people won't look at some of this, and especially in 2025, where it's like it's so obvious for so many people that there's something really going on in our world, and there are still a lot of people that want to remain asleep and just don't look at it, just stuff it down, numb it away. And I would say that ignorance is not bliss at this point.
Mhm.
Ignorance is dangerous. And that's just me because of where I am. And also recognize divine order is in all things. And the one thing I'll just wrap up on this is there's a lot of responsibility that comes with facing off with the uncertainty and the fears. And the responsibility is, what will this mean for my life? Will I have to take action? Will I blow up my life as I know it, or my business? And the truth is that that may happen. But what will also happen is something that you cannot know until you're in it, which is that all of the goodness and abundance and blessings that will be magnetized to you for standing in your truth, for standing in your light, for standing in your sovereignty. And so just felt like that was important to say, because I know how easy it can be to just be like, oop, that's not happening. I don't want to look at
Yeah.
that. I'm going to pretend it's not there. I just personally I feel like there's too much at stake. There's too much cost involved for me not to honor what is on my path, that I believe has been put on a path for a reason.
That's really cool. I around the time I met you, actually, like just right before I met you, I decided to get sober. And it wasn't just like put down the drink. It was like I was drinking too much for a lot of years, right? Like I don't want to sugarcoat it. And I was always able to pull it off because I was kind of the person that could drink heavily the night before, but had the whatever willpower to get up and like go for a run and show up for work and conduct the meeting and do the thing. And I kind of felt like as long as I did those things, I would be okay. I'm going somewhere with this as far as what you were talking about, but that journey, which took me a while, it was a little rough at first. I mean, I had really identified um, different states, like even having fun meant having drinks, you know what I mean? Like, and hanging out and partying and stuff like that. And so I had to, took a while to rewire that. And I tried to do it kind of solo, you know, like woe is me in a vacuum. But finally, when I kind of found the right recovery community for me, which was not all the traditional ones like AA and stuff like that. But when I found it, it I never really understood kind of the spiritual awakening stuff. I'm not really a religious guy, but I do consider myself spiritual. But then getting into it, it was what I started to understand was this: the universe is sort of open for business, and are you? You know what I mean? I had a mentor that said the universe is there like waiting for you. All you have to do is be open for business. Is kind of like, you know, what, watch for the signs, they're always there. And I mean, had he told me that back in my drinking days, I'd be like, okay dude, like whatever, you know. But it started making sense, and the more I started kind of following that, trying to be connected with consciousness, trying to be connected with the universe, which all came on the back of recovery, the better my life got. Like everything got better. It felt better, but also like if someone just wants to quantify it, like business results got better. You know what I mean? I became a better leader. I became more at ease. And I became more present. Like that was
Yes.
huge because if I'm watching for stuff, then I'm present, right? Instead of always just trying to drive my particular agenda or thing or task or whatever it is. So yeah, good for you. That's a cool journey. I have a. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I think.
I just wanted to say, I really honor that about you, Ken, because there are so many people right now that are more numbed out than they've ever been on this planet. And those are the ones that are still here. There's also a mass exodus happening because it's fairly unbearable for a lot of people and a lot of leaders, a
Yeah.
lot of that feeling the pressure, whether it's in their business, their career, their home life, the pressures of just being alive and the courage that it takes to walk these times. And so for you to share that and to face life and yourself, our shadows, all of it, soberly, clean-mindedly is powerful.
Thank you.
And what I wanted to add is that there are more and more and more of us who are saying like, yeah, I don't want that. That keeps me out of my power. It disallows me to be present and to be consciously connected so that I can be, internally guided and directed and supported at all turns, because we are, irrespective of what anyone's beliefs are. I'm not a religious person whatsoever either. But I too stopped drinking alcohol and all the things. I don't do anything, not even a gummy at night, nothing.
Right.
Um, that was, let's see, it was August 6th of 2021, I think. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we're coming up on 4 years this year. But I only picked up drinking during the COVID era for about a year, maybe 18 months, because I lived in Santa Monica. No, whatever. I let my excuses be my excuses. We were in
Mhm.
a 11-month lockdown. I didn't resonate with what we were being told on TV, and I was like one of three people in the whole city that didn't. So it was bananas for me. But before that, I think I went also 4 years without any alcohol.
Oh wow.
And my life is made with alcohol. But here's the funny thing, and this is going to resonate for some. Alcohol wasn't even my beast. It wasn't even the thing. It was cigarettes,
I remember
smoking
that because you
cigarettes.
came to Date with Destiny to beat that, didn't you?
Yes, and then I
Yeah.
did. And then I picked that up also the exact same time during the COVID era, and also totally let go of the cigarettes as well. And I don't think I'll ever pick up the cigarettes again in this life. And so grateful for that. But if I can't have one glass of wine because that'll be the gateway to a cigarette. And so I know these things. And of course, there's lots of days where I'm like, I would just love 10 cigarettes today, just to feel good. And I even have said that recently to my sister, and we laugh because I'm not going to.
Right.
But that one day at a time mentality that the AA, program really cultivates, which I'm not necessarily a 12 stepper or identify as someone who's, part of that paradigm. But one thing that I do love so much is, amongst many things, is just today. one day at a time. So
Yeah.
it's for me cigarettes, right? Like no cigarettes today. Tomorrow I can have 100. I can have 100 before 8 a.m. if I want. Tomorrow I can have as many as I want.
Right.
And I think I'm feeling called to really, really anchor into this because I know how anesthetized most people are. And especially if we're in a position of leadership, we can want to numb out because it's a lot, right? And so the real flex right now is, can we learn to be with everything that we are wanting to numb out? You want to talk about being the embodied leader? It's face yourself.
Totally.
It's the parts that you want to suppress, oppress, anesthetize. When we can learn to do that, and that's a skill set, that's an art, that is a dance, that's shamanic. But when we can learn to do that just by literally contemplation, quiet moments, candle gazing,
Yeah.
taking time in nature, and just start to you literally, you want to know your deepest core wound in this life that we just all continually numb out until we don't, is try to sit in silence for 3 to 5 minutes.
Sure.
It will show up, whatever it is. And so if we can learn to be with that, forget about even healing it, be with that, then the external leverages to numb that will no longer be as attractive, because what becomes more important is becoming strengthened and fortified to face anything on our path.
Totally. No, you said that so well. I think that's why meditation plays such a great part in like a healthy recovery or just a healthy mind in general. And it's kind of funny when I think back to my own journey with abuse, which was mainly alcohol, but I dabbled in some other things, you know what I mean? But really alcohol, and it started so young, 13 years old or so. By the time I was in high school, I had a regular habit that like never stopped. And when you think about that, I mean, you're 15 years old with a regular drinking habit and it doesn't end until you're in your 50s. It's like if every time something's not going perfect or you don't want to sit with the thoughts and there's an easy way out, and we're not awake enough to recognize like, oh, I'm taking the easy way out, it's just natural to go like, oh, let's go get a drink, right? Let's go get a beer, let's go do whatever, and we're just numbing out, and it's just over and over and over again. So what I found in sobriety, and it took a while because again, I was sort of the woe is me lone ranger of sobriety for a while, but as soon as I got connected with some people and some mentors, and a guy in particular named Tommy Rosen, who's got a fantastic book called
Love Tommy Rosen.
Oh, good. He's my
Oh yeah.
buddy. He's been
Yeah,
on
I
our
love
show like three
Tommy.
times.
I love Tommy. I love his wife, Kia. I used to
Yeah,
talk,
yeah.
this is way back in the day in LA. Wow.
Oh, they're our
Most
buddies.
incredible leaders on the planet.
Yeah.
That's so
They're
cool that you know him.
they're amazing. It was my wife through me. I'll give you just a little bit of
Yeah.
backstory with Tommy. So it's 2019. I'm dealing with sobriety, but I'm not. Like I'm like the dry drunk, you know what I mean? I'm like, okay, I'm not drinking, but I'm not fucking happy about it. You know what I mean? And you know, I don't listen always the first time people tell me good stuff, And so Shannon had told me about Tommy's book 2 or 3 times. She read it and she's not even involved in recovery. She's just like, this is a really good book for living your life. And I was like, okay. Finally, one day I read it and I was like, he gets it. He gets me. He gets it. He literally took the 12 steps, which are really pretty genius if you strip them down of all the religious bullshit overtone and the I'm an alcoholic and I have to admit it every day kind of thing, like a mantra. But the actual steps as a personal development guidebook are really good. So he like reworded them and, made you, take away all the language, all the triggering language and stuff and just go, no, just kind of here's what this really means. Right. And you can do it. And so we went to a retreat that he and Kia were at in Costa Rica, got to meet him there. We became buddies. I started hosting some meetings in his group. And yeah, we've been connected since. He's been on the podcast like 3 times. We've talked about all kinds of different stuff. He's just a great person. So is Kia. I don't know her as well, but I know Kia pretty well too.
Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
cool. I just got, really grateful and moved that we have him in common, because that's not a mistake, and and quite frankly it feels very sacred to me. Like, he is one of those very rare souls that he is who he presents as. He is, yeah. I love Tommy Rosen.
He's
And he probably has no idea that I feel this deeply about him, but he's a light on this planet,
he
he and
is.
his wife. And it's so wonderful to watch their rise these last few years. They've gotten really They've gotten, yeah, there's a lot of attraction to them, and it's their light is bright. And I just, yeah, couldn't be
Well,
happier that you brought him up.
well, what I started learning through him and through that community was once I started actually doing the work and doing the unpacking and realizing like, where is this coming from? Because by the way, I had my own little COVID moment too. And I didn't start drinking again, but I was like, I've never had a problem with weed. So
Mhm.
that would be fun. It's something to do where, Netflix and chilling. And so let's smoke pot. And then pretty soon that turned into, well, it's 5 o'clock somewhere, which turned into I'm walking the dog, let's take a gummy. And then literally on the night I went to the first meeting that I went to with them and read his book. I just read his book over like 2 days. I was so into it. And I was like, oh, that's it. I get it. I get it now. I don't need to do this anymore. And then I guess kind of the healing began, which was, you know, all these adult emotions. I've never really learned how to deal with them when you think about it. It was like, I've got a problem with someone, shut it down. Like just, either react or shut it down. Like one of those two things, but don't sit with it. You don't have to sit with it. You can just drink or smoke or do whatever you're going to do. And but it was a tough time, but it was also a really cool, almost nostalgic time. I remember being suddenly, I've always loved music, but like music from my pre getting wasted days, like mid 70s music was all of a sudden like I couldn't get enough of it. You know what I mean? And I think it was because it was the last time I was clear and conscious, you know what I mean? And not numbed out. It's
Yeah,
wild.
that's so interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I really feel for you, and I totally get it. Like similar. Yeah, I went through a very interesting little phase with cannabis too, and then I was like, yeah, first of all, I don't want to smoke anything, and
Right.
then I don't want any gummies, and then but it was still hard to let go of the gummies at night. I would justify no, but it gives me 8, 9 hours of sleep, and but the truth is that kind of alluding to a lot of things that I've been speaking to, a lot of things I've been alluding to in this conversation. Um, I didn't want anything coming in the way of a sovereign mind, body, and spirit.
Right.
So I just want anything playing with it. There's already so much happening
Right.
with the EMPs and the EMFs and the chemtrails and the pollution and the poisoning. It's just like, I don't want to add
Yeah,
to
you don't
that.
need to add to the
I don't need to
mix.
add to it.
Yeah.
Exactly. But again, this is we're speaking about some deeply courageous traits of conscious leadership. Maybe that's the distinction: is there's leadership and then there's conscious leadership. There's relationship and there's conscious relationship. And when you get sober and clear-minded, you don't always become conscious, but you can't you, I just can't even imagine moving forward in the world as a guide, as a leader, as a lover, as a friend, as a, community member without that conscious aspect of just my energetic blueprint, how I'm showing up, my ability to
Right.
be present, all that. Yeah, just and it goes together, and it gets better. A lot of my friends from the old world where we would have our $500 brunches, at the fancy hotel in Santa Monica every Saturday or Sunday for that whole time and during COVID era. Um, and they'd be like, but where do you have fun? How do you have fun?
Right.
And in the beginning, it doesn't feel fun. I'm not gonna lie, it doesn't feel fun. And then what you start to realize is everything is fun, and
Right.
you wake up with more joy in your heart, and life is a miracle, and everything is mystical and no longer mundane, and you don't need to numb out because everything is magic. I mean, honestly, and that sounds lofty, but I really mean that. And you can have a lot of success. I want to say this because leaders are going to want to hear this too. And I don't really like to talk about money, and I won't give specifics, but I will say last year, so 2024 was my strongest and highest grossing year in business to date. And I didn't think I could ever surpass what happened in 2020 when the world was learning how to pivot and be online. And that was the kind of stuff I used to teach back then. And then I stripped it all away, and it was just, let's just go pure essence, pure value. Forget about the courses. Let's talk about like how we really show up, and that frequency and what people are really longing for, which is an internal shift,
Yeah.
right? So that we don't numb out. And it turns out women wanted that, needed that, and then I could be compensated well for that. Now that can only happen if we do the real work and they can recognize that frequency, right? that you're doing that work and that you're not what you once were, which is what you had, acknowledged earlier. But there's something so beautiful to be, there's something so beautiful to be said about getting on this path, having that courage to get on the path and to trust that if you just keep showing up one day at a time, that it will get better. And then before you know it, you look back and it's a dream life. Now
Yeah.
you have these successes that far outweigh what I thought I was going to experience when I was 5. I'm not looking for the fame. I don't want to be on television. And in fact, I tried to turn down this big spread in Success magazine last year because I was certain they were going to take it and twist it and it was not going to be honorable. And they actually really did honor it and went through lots of rounds of that. But we just can't imagine when we're on the front end of that courage and action of what it's going to be like once we're through it.
Right.
And there's just nothing better, and I'm sure you agree.
I do agree. And I think what was interesting, the toughest time making the decision was actually empowering, right? Making the decision felt great because it had been the elephant in the room for like ever. You know what I mean? And I'm like, I felt brave. I felt in integrity. I felt all of that, but I didn't do all the things I would advise someone to do now, which is, find mentors, find people that you resonate with, this is, and instead it was just sort of like, let me just white knuckle and push my way through this thing. And so the suffering, was unnecessary, or at least the length of it, you know what I mean? Because there was people like Tommy that were always out there. Had I been looking for them, had I said like, great, let me read that book the first time my wife told me about it, you know what I mean? But I wasn't having that. I wasn't in that mindset right then. I was in the like, I'm punishing myself, you know what I mean? Kind of mindset. Um, but it's been, it really has, you mentioned that. I started thinking about this, like, I guess kind of philosophically, is what is alcohol or any other drug that you're taking? Why are we taking it? Because it's not just to have fun. It's to escape, it's to numb, it's to whatever, but ultimately it's to change our state, right? I'm still me inside. I'm just changing my state by using something else. So if I'm aware of that, then what are, and I remember, I probably have it here somewhere. I remember early on, once I started finally getting it, writing down like, what are all the things that just bring me to like my ultimate state that's not artificial like this, right? That's not like numbing me into it, but like, and so it's family, it's nature, it's dogs, it's, you know what I mean? It's all that. And the list goes on and on. I remember I had like front and back of a sheet of all of these different ways that give you that feeling. And it's real. It's
Yeah.
not just like, oh, we got super fucked up last night. It wasn't that great. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, I totally know what you mean. And I love that. And I feel the same way about many of those things that bring me into that beautiful, fulfilled state as well. Um, what I was able to recognize for myself as I did a deeper inquiry, like you, on what is this? And again, I really need to preface with I'm not religious whatsoever. Um, but it was recognizing that the alcohol or the cigarettes really was trying to satiate a disconnection, a sense of abandonment from feeling held and guided and loved by something beyond even this world, like call
Mm-hmm.
it the divine, call it God, call it
Mm-hmm.
a higher power. And so trying to numb out or whatever, it could be anything, the alcohol, the cigarettes, the success, the accolades, the status, the money, etc. It's all trying to feed a hungry ghost. It's
Yeah.
not possible, right? So I had to learn how to sit and to fill myself up. And that came through spiritual ritual, spiritual devotion and practice. And in the beginning, it was really hard and really uncomfortable. And like, it just felt like a lost absolute cause. Like, are you kidding me to sit still for even 60 seconds? One, I would be open and like, it's been 10 minutes, right? and, and about 3.5 years ago, I actually replaced my television. Oh, well, I have a media console. At the time, it was in my living room. And I got rid of the television. I no longer wanted to just numb my mind with any of that stuff. And I felt like it was a lot of really wild programming. These days, I can watch some stuff on Netflix or Amazon if I choose, but I really am not even that interested at this point. Once you get off that, you're like, wow, that's a whole other thing.
Right.
But I replaced everything. I replaced the television with what would become my altar, like a sacred personal altar. And I didn't know what to do in the beginning with that. I found like a meditation pillow that my sister had loaned my mother, and I saw at her house, and I was like, "Can I borrow that?" And I lit some candles, and I had a couple things up there, some crystals, and I didn't really know what to do. I just knew that I was meant to just kind of sit and to wait. I didn't know what was happening. And then before I knew it, it became a near daily practice. And now I can weep, I can forgive, I can heal, I can listen,
Oh,
listen,
that's
listen,
cool.
listen. And it's just this communion that will allow me to see whatever I need to see in that given moment that previously, unconsciously, I couldn't see, but I could feel. And so I would numb out,
Makes sense.
right?
And it really makes sense that you caught it. You know what I mean?
Yes. And so
Um,
I have this beautiful practice that may or may not be helpful for anyone, but this is what we do in one of my women's groups called Wisdom. And it's taking inventory on I would say minimum a weekly basis, and any rift in your heart, and that could be something as benign as how you communicated with someone who works at AT&T and it was a customer representative. How this happened to me recently, there was an item that I had bought from an Etsy store, and she lived in Turkey, the owner of the store, the country Turkey, and I'm here in Texas. I never received it. She was saying she wouldn't give a refund until she got it back. I'm like, I never got it. So it just became this thing, and I realized, oh, that was a rift in my heart because it was unresolved, right?
mm,
And then you can take the bigger things like, oh, a client, or a parent, or a friend, or a spouse, or whatever. Or how about a rift with you against you, your body, your addictions, your patterns,
yeah.
your habits. And so getting clear on that, writing it all out, and then making a decision that can be very empowering. How do I choose to resolve this? Some of it could just be taking it into prayer and meditation and resolving that in your own mind, because these rifts could be people who are no longer alive, right?
Right.
And or it could be rifts of politicians or celebrities or whatever.
Right.
And so, but they're real to us in our nervous system. And so it's there, it's this kind of fractured energy that's seeking resolution.
Yeah.
Sometimes we need to text, we need to call, we need to ask for a conversation. Sometimes we need to write a letter. Sometimes we just need to journal. Sometimes we actually need to do nothing at all except just be with it, because being with it will show us if there's anything to do with it at all. So I've given a lot of different ways in which we can choose to resolve. But these heart rifts, if our hearts are not clear and purified and open, then this is another way in which we will end up making choices to numb out and to suppress all of life's beautiful gifts that is constantly showing us where our evolution is. And that's where it gets magical, is when we're willing to be present to our lives. But it can't happen if that lifeline, if you will, that spiritual lifeline is dense
Yeah.
and stuck with some rifts.
I'm so with you on that. And as you were talking about it, what I'm thinking about from recovery is resentments.
Yes. Oh yeah, that's
Is
a rift for
yeah,
sure.
it's just resentment. I mean, resentments, it can be little baby resentments, right? That are, but it's
We really want to look at the baby ones, because
yeah,
the baby ones are the sneakiest ones, because we're like, oh, it's just a little speck on the sweater. And then you pull on it because you give it your attention, which we don't want to do. But when we do, we're like, oh my gosh. And we see underneath the sweater, it's got this big ball of
right.
yarn,
Totally.
Oh my gosh, that's been there since I was 4, right?
Right.
Crack it.
Well, and what I found in the resentment part, it's been so interesting is now when something sits with me. So let's just talk about the lady in Turkey from Etsy, right? I don't know how you interacted with her or how she interacted with you, but when it sits with me, because it's just a whatever, 50, $100, $200 item, whatever it was, right? It's nothing in the long scheme of things. But if it sits with me, it has so much more to do with how I reacted to it than what it actually is. You know what I
Yes.
mean? So the clearing of it, the solving of it, the sitting with it, the sometimes apologizing for it, even when, you know, that was another thing I learned there is like, I'm only responsible for myself and my actions, right? Like that's all I can really handle. And keeping kind of myself clean and honorable to myself, right? So I get in I try not to, but just as an example, if I get into an incident with somebody and they flip me off and I flip them off back, I'm not really mad at them. I'm mad at me for getting triggered. Do you know what I mean? And if I see that person get out of their car, I'll be like, I'm sorry, I'm having a bad day. I shouldn't have done that. Have a nice one, whatever. Like that would clear it for me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
The
And
complaining to
also,
the oh, go ahead.
well, sorry to interrupt.
Oh no, not at
But
all.
there are these moments where you do need to just let that energy that's coming up be expressed as like flipping them the bird, and then
Yep.
immediately if we're halfway conscious, like, oh my God, I'm embarrassed. I
Yeah.
mean, I wish I hadn't done that. But there's going to be those moments when we do. And so can we be, compassionate with ourselves of like, I mean, this has only happened honestly, probably 3 or 4 times in my entire life of having my pup, my dog, Samson. I don't have to I, I I can think of 3 or 4 times where I've ever even like yelled at him. And one was this morning.
Oh wow.
And there was so much going on, there was so much pressure, and there was a lot happening, and it was very dense, so much that I almost rescheduled on you. And it was just this whole thing that I had to move through this morning, with a lot of different people and moving parts. And I found myself maxed out, and I had to come in here and lead a group, and he was not decisive of coming in or out of the office, coming in. And I was like, get in or get out, and it was just like,
Yeah.
oh my God. I open up the door, I go sit down next to him at 3 minutes before the call, and I was like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. But then I noticed, ooh, am I wanting to dwell in my shame?
Right.
Is that okay? Because that's not everyone can get that. And I was like, oh, wait, nope, I'm not dwelling in the shame. I'm aware. I was unconscious. I yelled at you. I am really sorry. I want to just tend to you.
Right.
You know that I'm sorry, and I'm not going to hold on to the shame. However, I'm going to do my very best to not do that again,
Yeah.
and be, in my own possession enough to where I don't have to yell at my innocent little pup who's
Yeah.
like not sure why he's being asked to make a decision on to whether or not he needs to come in or out. He just was just not following along in that moment, right?
Right.
But that whole arc, like, can I let go of that as quickly as it happens, but while almost like processing it thoroughly and deeply where I don't have to hang on to it for the
Right.
next few.
So that you can close it out. You can close the
Yes,
loop. It doesn't keep going. And that's what I meant too about these conversations or interactions that because listen, it's all a work in progress. They still happen. And whenever I notice myself dwelling on something, even if the other person was 60% in the wrong and I was only 40% in the wrong, like it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? I was there. I have to own my it's my part of this that I get obsessed about, not theirs. I can let theirs go because I'm not responsible for them and this is going to pass, right? So,
totally. They're so funny because when I made one of my lists about my heart's rifts, maybe it was a week and a half ago, there was one woman on there who attended one of my retreats, and this is the only time that something just she had made some promises and committed to some things, um, that we hired for her, and then she just didn't want to do it. So even on the prep call to the retreat, it was, she had mentioned to my assistant she wasn't going to do it. And I'm like, listen, it's too late. You don't have to do it, but you do need to take care of the thing. And so that was a whole confrontation. And then she got that. And she was like, you're right. She's like, okay, I'll take care of that. And I'm probably just going to do it anyway. It was a photo shoot. And then day of the retreat, she was like, yeah, I'm not doing it. And so it just became this thing. And so I said to her, if you don't do it, I'm going to have to eat that. And she's like, well, why would you? She's like, this is the service provided. She was very in her thing. And I said, this is someone who she's counting on that. It
right,
was an agreement made. It's a contract, and she's coming to my retreat, and I want to honor her time and her art, and her business. And so I will pay for it. I will pay for it out of my own money. And so to this day I did. And so anyway, I realized like, oh, she made it to my list of riffs.
yeah,
Right. But what I want to say on that is there are some times, and this is an interesting thing, and I don't mean to sound like, oh, like this is next level, but sometimes we do have the ability to see like a newer dimension, right?
mm-hmm.
It's really important to note who has the capacity to be with that level of resolution. And sometimes we do just need to for a lack of a better term, eat crow and simply say, no problem. I can see that that's something that you really don't want to do. I'll go ahead and take care of it for you.
Right.
Or make the list of the heart riffs, recognizing like that conversation, there's no capacity for that conversation. Does that make
Right.
sense, Ken?
Yeah. Nothing's being served.
Right. It's
Yeah.
because that person will still be defended. I will still feel unheard. It's just, but I can recognize, ooh, that doesn't feel good in my own heart. So then I get to, like you said, take it back on ownership of self. Where can I do differently next time? Where can I be more clear in my communication? Where can I be more honoring of the whole thing, right? So that, maybe this doesn't happen in the future. I mean, personally, I don't know how I could have been more clear, but it doesn't matter because this was supposed to happen. And so I guess I say all that because doesn't mean the resolution is going to resolve where this person's like, oh, yeah, I see, Ken, you are totally
Right.
60% right.
Right. Right.
No, that's all ego. It's
Right.
like sometimes we just have to sit in the discomfort, and that is the teacher. That
Right.
is the resolution.
Right. And I think part of the resolution too, and then I'm gonna let you go. We're coming up on the hour, but is the resolution to me is within ourselves, right?
Yes.
It's within ourselves. So again, it's just not about them. So it's like, am I good with how I showed up here? Am I good with how I acted here? What can I learn from it? What can I do different? Close the loop, move
That's
on,
right. That's
right?
right.
Tomorrow's a new day.
Yeah. And then I'll also just say, I love to close the loop with an ellipsis. And what I mean by that is, because I do believe in the words of my favorite spiritual teacher, Ram Dass,
Yeah, it's great.
we are all walking each other home. And I am so down for someone, including myself, coming back to a conversation weeks later, months later, years later, decades later, and saying, can we revisit something? I would love to share with you. And I may be in a different space. I may see and feel that they're, available in a different way. And so I just like to offer that because nothing has to be finite. I mean, we're on this amazing trajectory of the evolution of our consciousness. And if we can reflect on just how much we've grown since we met in December of
Mm-hmm.
2017 through
Mm-hmm.
that Date with Destiny event, then I have to imagine that others are on that same path as well. And so I just really do love to offer the benefit of the doubt. But another thing that wants to come through is yes, and just make sure that you are discerning, right? Just discerning because there's healthy discernment that also needs to be woven in. So with that, I hope that makes sense, but felt like it wanted to be shared at the tail end of this conversation.
God, that's so good. I could go another hour here, but I
Me
know
too.
neither one
We
of
could
us
have another one.
can.
Yeah, I really, really enjoyed this.
Thank you so much. We didn't even get to anything that I know you have a retreat coming up in March and stuff like that, but I'll put all of that stuff in the show notes if
When
that's
does this
cool.
air?
This will probably air, and I can make it air earlier, but it's probably set up for like mid-March right now.
Oh yeah, perfect.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, I have a retreat coming up. It'll probably be sold out by then, but it's coming up in the third week of March. And but listen, it's just always nice to connect and meet new community members. And really, if there's any invitation that I could just impart on anyone, including myself, is just be willing to listen, really, really listen and to hone that listening. And what does that really even mean? And then from there, it just feels like life is magic because it just everything gets presented on the path, the right teacher, the right teaching, the right resource, and life becomes a bit of a flow and a dance and much, much more easeful. Yeah.
it seems like it has been for you these last few years. So good to catch up.
Likewise, my friend. I'll talk to you soon.